Welcome to a special edition of Alternatief TV. The Netherlands is on the Ukrainian side participating in a war between Russia and Ukraine. Our mainstream media is giving a very one-sided pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian view on the conflict. It is crucial for a peace settlement to have a dialogue with Russia and listen to the arguments from the other side. After the 24th of February 2022, I had exclusive interviews with the former Russian ambassador to the Netherlands, Mr. Shulgin. The new Russian ambassador to the Netherlands is here today and is Mr. Tarabrin. This is Alternatief TV. We ask where the mainstream media is silent. I'm Gietelink and my guest today is the Russian ambassador, Mr. Tarabrin. Welcome, Mr. Tarabrin.
Thank you.
There's going on a war for more than 2 years now between Ukraine and Russia, or a special military operation, as you call it. And I would, in the upcoming interview, want to clarify the causes and the Russian position of it. And the first question I have for you is, what is your own personal background?
Well, thank you, first of all, very much for this interview. I'll try to answer all your questions. I believe it's very important that Russian point of view is brought to the attention of the Dutch media. I came here 4 months ago, and on the 21st of January I presented my letters of credence to His Majesty the King of the Netherlands. Before my diplomatic career is now will reach the point of 45 years next autumn. And I was posted to many countries. I spent a lot of years in West Africa. I was a legal advisor of the Russian mission to the United Nations. I was ambassador of Russia to Gabon. And for recent years, I was director of the Department on New Challenges and Threats of the Foreign Ministry. That is the department that is dealing with international cooperation in the fight against terrorism, narcotic drugs, organized crime, piracy, etc.
Right. How would you consider the position of the Russian embassy in the moment in Holland? How many people are working there still, and how do you see that?
Well, the position of the Russian embassy is rather difficult, I would say. First of all, the number of personnel was reduced drastically. It was due to the decision of the Dutch side. And now we have only 6 diplomats, and including ambassador. And also a number of persons, a number of diplomats who are dealing with OPCW, since we also are a permanent mission to the OPCW. It's two missions under one roof, I would say.
Yeah, that's the organization against chemical control in The Hague.
This is organization on the prohibition of chemical weapons that is based also in The Hague.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what is most, I would say, difficult for us is the fact that we don't have a head of the consular section. This post was eliminated, and now it's my deputy minister counselor who has to perform also the duties of the consul. And we have quite a lot of Russian citizens here in the Netherlands.
How many?
Well, about 40,000, you know.
40,000?
40,000, yes.
And the consulate was here in The Hague at the Museum Square, right?
Yes. It is still there, but it's only one person, one diplomat who is supposed to perform consular duties.
Right.
Yeah, and certainly the workload is enormous, and people are complaining that they cannot receive the consular service in time, but that's the reality that we are facing, and that certainly is not an easy task for us. And all other avenues of cooperation, of interaction between Russia and the Netherlands are very much reduced. We don't have a lot of dialogue with the authorities. And there are from time to time anti-Russian demonstrations, manifestations in front of the embassy, and that certainly aggravates our position here, but nevertheless we are prepared to continue to perform our duties and to represent Russia in this country.
I understand. Would you say, because there is almost a war-like communication between the Russian authorities and the Russian Federation, would you say there is growing Russophobia in the Netherlands?
Well, regrettably, I would say that there is a kind of a Russophobia, and even in 2022, the authorities has to issue a kind of a warning because there was an escalation. Now the situation, I would say, perhaps has improved, but still we face sometimes the hostile attitude of some business circles, of those who provide the services to us, and certainly. How would you describe that? I mean, can you give an example? How does this Russophobia work in the business Well, for
circles?
instance, sometimes we have difficulties with the renting of houses for living. Yes,
right.
Some companies just refuse to have business with us on some issues of rendering services. Yeah?
Right.
Yeah, and I stopped receiving invitations from universities, from schools. In previous years, they were always inviting Russian ambassador to come and to speak. Now, no. And even, there was a kind of a couple of times when I did receive these invitations, then I accepted them. There was a kind of just notice, oh, sorry, that was just mistake.
I mean, it was a mistake.
It was a mistake, yeah.
You got an invitation and you accepted and they said, no, we don't want you.
Yeah, it's a mistake.
Right, I understand.
And the problem is, just people, they know very little about what's happening, what's all about Ukraine,
right.
What's happening in Russia. And that's also the problem, because all just channels of communication are cut. For instance, we had very good relations in the sphere of culture. Yeah, there was this Hermitage Museum. It's closed.
Hermitage here in Amsterdam.
Yeah, closed. Yeah, there were festivals closed.
Right.
But at the same time, when this awful terrorist act in Moscow happened in a couple of months ago, yes, Crocus City Act, we received a lot of condolences from the ordinary Dutch people, and also people were coming to the fence of the embassy. They put flowers, they just put toys, and we are very much grateful for this expression of solidarity.
Right. Would you say that Russophobia, now you talk about the embassy and yourself, but would you say that Russophobia is existing as well against the 40,000 normal Russian people in the Netherlands?
Well, there were complaints. Yes, there were complaints. Now the situation perhaps improved, but there were complaints that, for instance, children, Russian children who were studying in schools, in universities, they were just discriminated. Mm-hmm. And after the appeal of the government, I think it's a bit improved, but still there are incidents. I don't say that it's widespread. No. But it happens.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What do you, when you look to the Dutch media? I mean, you're only for some months here, but you have an impression from the Dutch media in the last 2 years, according to Russian and the Ukraine-Russian conflict. How do you observe them? What do you think?
Well, I would say with regret that Dutch media is absolutely biased and one-sided. It presents only one version of the whole story. You know, there is no alternative information, alternative versions. It's just only one picture that is shown. And even when there are facts that say to the contrary, they are either ignored, or they are distorted, or they are somehow mixed, yes. And that's why I'm very grateful to you that you invited me and that I have an opportunity to speak, because not a single Dutch mainstream media ever invited me or even accepted our proposal to have some kind of a contact.
Right. And this was the same for your predecessor, Mr. Shulgin?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Let them first go to the causes of the war, of the special military operation, as you called it. And I want to start, because there are more causes of the war, but I will start with the NATO expansion. From 1999 to 2024, 16 new European nations joined NATO. What happened, and what is the problem for Russia?
Well, first of all, we should not forget that NATO was created as it's not a universal organization, it's a military bloc that was created to oppose the Soviet Union and then the Warsaw Pact.
Right.
Today, there is no Soviet Union, it's dissolved, and the Warsaw Pact doesn't exist. So there is no any ground for the existence of this military pact. Nevertheless, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was expanding. It was contrary to the promises that were given to President Gorbachev, the last president of the Soviet Union, and then I think also to President Yeltsin, that NATO will not expand eastwards.
Yeah. To make it clear for the audience, there were talks between Gorbachev and his team and the Western teams in 1990 in Berlin.
And our at that time our interlocutors they said that no, NATO will not expand. No. They just deceived us.
Right.
And then
now is the other side, when you take this argument, is saying, yeah, maybe it's a bit true, but the 16 countries asked NATO to join, to be joined by themselves.
Yeah.
What is your result of that?
First of all, there is a principle of indivisibility of security. You cannot build your security on the basis when the security of the other side is reduced. Otherwise it's not safe. It's not safe. And this principle of indivisibility of security, it was envisaged in many documents, and the documents of OSCE, it was many times confirmed by the West itself, but violated in practice. But we did, frankly, we did our best to build up good working relations with NATO.
Right.
It was until the very last moment before the start of the special military operation when we proposed an agreement between Russia and NATO. It was by the end of 2021.
Right.
Yeah, when we proposed two agreements, one to the United States and the second to NATO. Just they were interconnected.
And what was the content of this agreement?
It was just the main content of it was that we wanted some guarantees of security. They rejected. This proposal was absolutely rejected. We first we wanted that the expansion of NATO is to be ceased, that Ukraine will not join the NATO.
Right.
That the NATO will return to its borders when on the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Well,
I understand.
That's a question which is very far going. Because
yes,
we are 30 years later.
Perhaps. But guarantees of security to Russia is a legitimate demand,
Right.
Yeah, and the issue of Ukraine is also a legitimate demand, because Ukraine is our closest neighbor, just it's
you see it as a Russian, partly Russian.
Yeah,
country.
we see the membership of Ukraine in NATO as a direct threat to our security.
Do you have the feeling when I say Ukraine, when you look to the Russian history, you look to the culture of Ukraine, the culture of Russia, you would say Ukraine is our small brother, right? And it walked over to the enemy.
Yes, you may say so. Well, Russia and Ukraine, Russians and Ukrainians are two brotherly nations. There is also a theory, a concept that I personally share to a very large extent, that it's one nation.
Right.
It's one nation, there is no difference between Russians and Ukrainians, at least with the Ukrainians who live in the east and south of this country. Yeah, perhaps.
Why? Well, I mean, what would you consider is the difference between Ukrainians in the east and south and in the west?
Because, Western Ukraine for centuries was under the Lithuanian, Polish, and then Austrian rule. So most of them, or many of them, are Catholics, while the eastern part of Ukraine is Orthodox, and they speak Russian. They speak Russian, they think Russian in Russian.
And they want to be with Russia.
Yes, and their mentality is absolutely the same as those of the southern and central part of Russia. There is no difference,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We come on another course, 2014, Maidan, the Maidan revolt and the Maidan coup d'etat. What happened and what is the result of that?
Well, yes, in 2014 was a classical coup d'etat when the legitimate president Yanukovych was ousted from power. You know, one might have different opinion about the personality of Mr. Yanukovych. Yeah, but he was legitimate president who was democratically elected by the Ukrainian people.
Right.
Yes, he was ousted. All the guarantees that were given to him by the Western countries, by Germany and by France, who participated in this final just process, they were just thrown away. And immediately after this coup d'etat, very, I would say, anti-Russian forces came to power, who immediately started to ban Russian language, to make people who consider themselves Russian to somehow just throw away their national identity. And this caused absolutely naturally quick polarization of the society, especially regions of Donbass and Lugansk, who consider themselves Russians. But in spite of, or instead rather than trying to find a compromise with them, yeah, kind of a solution, the authorities, the so-called authorities, they proclaimed them separatists, terrorists, and started this so-called anti-terrorist operation, which was a clear suppression of these peoples. And you know, very little is known about this period, about this 8 years of conflict before the start of the military operation.
Yeah, between 2014 and 2022. There was happening after the coup d'etat some other actions which are important, I think. Donetsk, Luhansk and Crimea declared themselves independent, organized
referenda.
Would you say, what was the result of the referenda in your view, and would you say the referenda which they organized in 2014 are reliable?
Yes, certainly. These referenda were very, I would say, very free. In spite of the just version in the West that it was imposed and conducted under the Russian rifles, no, they were free. And 90% of the population spoke for being with Russia, you know. And that's the fact that no one can deny. When you come to Crimea, when you come to Lugansk, to Donetsk, you can ask anyone, you know, just on the streets, with whom they are, what side they are on. The answer will be absolutely
90 to 10%.
Yeah.
So 90% of the people say in this areas,
yes,
3 areas.
90% pronounced for being with Russia. So right. It's absolutely overwhelming majority, you know.
Right.
And at the same time, Kiev continued to conduct this military operation, and there was not a single day of peace in Donetsk, in Donbass, you know, during these 8 years. And official figures that 8,500 civilians were killed. That was before the start of the operation. 8,500 civilians.
Right. The total amount of people was killed was 14,000. 8,500 were civilians, and the rest was military from both sides. Yeah. Right?
No. I mean, when this so-called anti-terrorist operation of Kiev in Donetsk and Lugansk 8,500 civilians were killed during this operation.
Right.
Then, yes, Minsk agreements, yes, came.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When
in 2015 there were the Minsk agreements.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yes, when it became obvious, I think, for Kiev and for their Western patrons that they were not able to crush Donbass and Lugansk by force, then this was a kind of a attempt to find a political solution. And with the participation of Russia, with the participation of France and Germany, and certainly Kiev regime, these Minsk agreements were signed, and the main elements of this was a ceasefire, was the elimination of withdrawal rather of heavy weapons from the area, the control of the border. But most importantly, certainly the most important issue is a constitutional reform in Donbass and Lugansk that would provide for an autonomy of these two regions, and certainly their right to have Russian language as their second official language, to speak Russian, to write Russian, to communicate in Russian, and to live with Russia.
Right.
But within Ukraine.
Right.
And if these agreements were implemented, I believe now we would not have a war, and perhaps these two regions would stay in Ukraine. It's certainly
there was a kind of compromise. They would stay into Ukraine,
yeah.
but the Ukraine with autonomy and no Ukraine army.
Yeah,
it had to win Israel.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen because they didn't want to implement it. They used these agreements only as a time-winning exercise, to use these years to build up Ukrainian military machine, to modernize the army that was rather weak at that time, to provide weapons, to be prepared for the war. And, it's ironically, but it's Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Hollande, former president of France, they admitted it openly. They said, no, we were not prepared we were not going to implement the agreements. That was a kind of to win the time.
Well, was it for you as well? To be honest, I was shocked a bit, but it must be for Russians quite shocking that they openly said, we were prepared.
Yeah.
We were not honest.
Yeah.
When we made this agreement with Mr. Putin.
Yeah. It was very, 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 very disappointing. I would not say that it was a shock, because we saw their reluctance and their just during these 7 years. We somehow understood that they were not going.
What happened? What happened? Because for a lot of people, it is difficult to understand why it is 8 years, or after 2015, 7 years, right?
Yeah.
There was a time of 7 years, which is quite long. What was the danger before the invasion? What was the real point where the Russian government and Mr. Putin said, now enough is enough, we got to end this?
First of all, as I have already said, in these 8 years there was not a single day of peace for Donbass and Lugansk. Right. And Ukrainian side got even more aggressive, even more, I would say, cruel and tough on the population of Donbass and Lugansk. They constructed a lot of structures to wage the war, and their rhetoric became more and more aggressive against Russia. And I think it was in the beginning of the 2022 when Zelensky said that they were considering going out of the Budapest memorandum that banned nuclear weapons in Ukraine. So they announced their plans to develop their own nuclear.
Really?
Yeah.
The Budapest memorandum said, in fact, that Ukraine won't be nuclear power.
Nuclear power.
So that's the only one who could be a nuclear power after the Soviet Union was Russia, not Ukraine.
So they challenged the Budapest memorandum on the pretext that Russia is aggressive, but that was certainly very naive to everybody. This explanation, and that is
but had they? I mean, I got the impression as well that there was a plan in the end of 2021 and beginning of 2024, just before the beginning of the special military operation, that they would advance and take the last parts of Donetsk and Luhansk.
Yes, certainly. That was, yes, I was going just to say this because it was absolutely clear to us that they were preparing to attack Donetsk and Lugansk regions, what was remaining there, and even just OSCE mission fixed that there was this ceasefire breaches. They just became more and more just frequent. It was absolutely clear that they were going to attack. But even at that time, we tried to find a solution, and as I have already mentioned, we proposed two memorandums to United States and to NATO. We sent our emissaries to negotiate. Everything was rejected. Everything was rejected. They didn't even want to speak with us. And these circumstances, we had no choice but to start this military operation.
You started the military operation. As you can say, in the first time you took in some days very big amounts of the Ukrainian land, which is Russian Ukraine. Then there was the situation that there were in September 2022, there were referenda in the four areas, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson. You said already what the people said in 90%, right, in Luhansk and Donetsk. How do you consider the position of the people in Zaporizhia and Kherson?
The same. The results of the referenda were almost the same. It was more than 80%, I think, as far as I remember. Right. It was overwhelming majority. So, because the people in Kherson and in Zaporozhye, it's the same Russian population, that speak Russian.
How far is this going when you go west, right? People are maybe more Ukrainian. And then I want to focus on the big cities, Kharkiv, 1.4 million people, and Odessa, right, which is a big city as well, which were original Russian cities.
Yes.
But would you consider that nowadays the majority of these people are on your side?
Well, for that time being, at present, there are 4 new subjects of the Russian Federation. Certainly, I am not speaking about Crimea. Crimea is Russia without any questions. I mean, these 2 new territories.
Right.
Yeah. So, according to Constitution, there we cannot even negotiate their future. They are part of Russia. As to Odessa and Kharkov, well, they are also, yes, they are historically they are Russian cities. But we do not have plans now to take them back.
You don't have plans to take them back,
no.
Because there is a lot of fear in the West, especially as well in Ukraine.
Our president just, I think, said some time ago that we don't have plans to take Kharkov. Our operation there in the north of Ukraine that is now going on. The main purpose of it is, just to create a kind of a buffer zone. Because our southern cities, mainly Belgorod, is being attacked and shelled and attacked by missiles by Ukrainians, and there are a lot of civilian casualties. There are no military installations there. There's civilians who are dying, So just to push this front line a bit further, that's the immediate purpose of the operation in the northern part of Ukraine.
But to make it clear, you want to create a safety zone,
yes,
and it's not the preparation to take Kharkov or to take Odessa.
No, I'm not aware of any plans.
Right. Yeah. It is not official policy.
No.
In principle, you will say the 4 areas which are adapted in Constitution, the 4 areas which we call Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. This is Russia, yes. And you want to make a deal on this area.
Yeah, and one more observation, perhaps, that I should say. For us, it is still a special military operation. It's not a war that is conducted with rather limited forces. Right. If we declare a war, for instance, and mobilize the population and put about 5 million soldiers, then that will be different. But
how many soldiers, professionals? There are only professionals on the front.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
How many professionals are there?
Well, I believe about maybe 500,000.
Right, and on the other side as well.
Maybe more, because they are now trying to mobilize everyone who is capable just to walk.
Right.
Yeah.
They send as well. All men are mobilized between 18 and 60.
Yeah. Zelensky declared that his task was to mobilize 1 million people. Yeah. And one more observation, that we are conducting our operation also by limited resources, and we save the lives of both Russian soldiers, and we save the lives of Ukrainian civilians. We do not attack civil installations. No, in spite of all the lies
you consider this as lies in the media, in the Western media?
Yes. Because what Ukrainians are doing, they use, for instance, a school or a hospital as a place to put their
military stuff.
They are soldiers, yes. They're. When we attack it, and it's a legitimate target, perhaps it was sometimes it was a school, yeah. But now it's military. It's an installation, yeah, or a hospital, for instance. There was a hospital. Now it's a military installation, or a kind of a hotel. You see, oh, we are taking hotel, but this hotel is inhabited by military,
right?
By the military, you know, and but there are very few. There are few cases. Certainly, military operation is always a military operation, but there are very few cases when civilians are dying. You know, there are a lot of provocations, but if we face the truth, no.
I want to go to different subjects. The BRICS. It is getting important. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now it's expanding with more, especially Arab countries. Yeah. How do you see the future of the BRICS in relation with the Western countries?
Well, you know, yes, you are right. BRICS is expanding, and I see the future of BRICS is very bright, because there is really an interest of many states to join it. If it were not just significant, then why states are so eager to join it? Yeah, and now, yes, there were 5 members, now 10 members, and even about 20 countries are very much eager to join. Yeah, and why? Because, you know, it's a kind of, it's not an organization, it's a group, it's a club like G20, for instance, where it's attractive because the avenues of cooperation that we promote, that are being promoted there, are interesting to everybody. It's issues of security, for instance, and not military issues, but combating terrorism, narcotic drugs, organized crime, corruption. It's, you know, just economic avenues of cooperation, creating, I would say, new avenues of exchange of currencies. Yes, we are now speaking of de-dollarization, yeah, and certainly it's one of the promising avenues of cooperation. And also the cultural, humanitarian, and sports area. And well, yes, now Russia is current chair of the BRICS. Right. There will be a summit in Kazan in October.
Right. This coming October will be a summit of the BRICS in Kazan, which is the east of Moscow. Is that?
No, Kazan is the capital of Tatarstan.
Yeah, but it is east of Moscow.
East of Moscow, yes. It's a very nice big city where very peacefully coexist Muslims and Christians, you know, for centuries.
Right.
Yeah, and certainly our main task for today is to accommodate 5 new members. It's.
And what are the 5 new members?
It's well. Let me just try to enumerate. It's Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates.
Right,
Egypt and Ethiopia.
Right. They are already parts. Right?
Yeah, they are already full members of the, but they are newcomers.
Right.
And you know, since BRICS, though in spite of the fact that it is a group, not an organization, it does have a kind of a structure, architecture, I would say, yeah, with different working groups. And with certainly Bank of Development, with forums being, and so these 5 new countries should somehow build themselves into this architecture.
And it means, of course, as well, that the economical ties between these countries, these BRICS countries, will be bigger. And of course, the Meerkaart, one of the banking cards of Russia, will be accepted in more countries in the world.
Yes, that's the goal. Yes, and not only Meerkaart, but also cards, national cards of these countries. You know, they also have their own systems. Just to make a kind of economic exchange as easy as possible, both cultural exchanges, both sport exchanges, and why also BRICS is so attractive, because there are, as you see, there are very different countries, just Brazil, Iran, for instance, yes. It's different continents, different religions, different cultures,
Right.
But no one is trying to impose the common approach like we have in the European Union, for instance, when there is a just collective group discipline and no one can
right, and everything is controlled out of Brussels, and you have to, and then it would be autocratically imposed out of Brussels to the member states. And of course, in the US is important.
We do not concentrate in BRICS on issues where we have different views. For instance, on the issues of nuclear disarmament, there might be different views between just countries. But when it comes, for instance, to combating terrorism or narcotic drugs, it's interesting to all countries,
Russia is, as a result of the special military operation, as you call it, in Ukraine, is put out of SWIFT. SWIFT, the international payment system. Do you work on an alternative for SWIFT?
We have already an alternative, and
What is that?
It's a kind of a payment system, exchange system that is similar to SWIFT, but it's not connected to this system. And we are starting to use this, and we are already using it with the countries like India, for instance, like China, where we can.
The BRICS countries are more and more implementing this new alternative SWIFT system.
Yes, it's now certainly the process is perhaps on the very initial stage of implementation, but I hope it will go on.
Back to Ukraine and as well to the solution. One of the things which we see in films, which is interesting, when Russia is taking some cities like Mariupol, there is a plan for reconstruction. I saw by myself some little films about reconstruction of Mariupol. What are the plans, and is this happening in more countries? Is there a policy behind it to rebuild Russian Ukraine?
Certainly. It's our territory, it's our people, and we will do our best, and we are already doing our best to rebuild everything that was destroyed during the hostilities. And if we take, for instance, Mariupol, the scale of construction there is really impressive. Those who see the films, or even those who come, they are impressed. They are impressed. And yes, and the same is being implemented in other big cities and towns when the situation allows this. For instance, just if the front line is just near, it's a bit premature to start. But
in Donetsk,
Donetsk, Lugansk, they are already certainly they are being rebuilt, they are being restored, in spite of the fact that Ukrainians are still continuing to shell Donetsk and to use long range or long range American missiles to attack this city, to attack civilian objects there. The same goes to Lugansk, and when the front line hopefully is pushed westwards, the other big cities, like, for instance, we liberated Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, as we called it, it will be restored. It will be restored. Yeah.
I mean, not now, but later when the
immediately after the situation allows, you know.
Right.
Yeah, certainly we cannot just build something when the shells are coming and when there is artillery under the artillery shelling. No.
Right.
But if when it permits, it will be certainly. It's our land. Yeah.
And then negotiations. We going to the end of the interview a bit. What are the possibilities for negotiations? Is Russia prepared to negotiate, and what are the terms for negotiation?
Yes, you know, I think we always stressed that we do not shut the door before the political process. Each conflict is to be settled by negotiations, and this one is not an exception. But and you know, if we remember, in March 2022, there was a process. There were negotiations in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine.
Right.
And it was these negotiations were rather successful. You know, a number of elements, basic elements, were more or less agreed. For instance, what we want, the neutral status of Ukraine, the non-aligned status of Ukraine, as well as guarantees of security to Ukraine. They were more or less agreed.
Settled. Would you say, I mean, there is said that the coming of Mr. Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, came on 9 of April 2022 to Kiev.
Yes.
Would you see that this is the end?
Yes.
It was the end?
Yes. Then Mr. Johnson just said, no, we should not negotiate, continue fighting. And they stopped abruptly all the contacts, all the talks. Then they banned any peaceful negotiations with Russia legally by the decree of the president. And so that's the situation. We believe that this Istanbul document can still be the basis for future solution. But if we mention this Geneva conference that is going to take place in next month, certainly, you know,
there is for the audience, there is an initiative out of Swiss to have a Geneva conference, peace conference. But there is a problem because Russia won't be joining that.
Yes. First of all, Russia is not invited. You know.
Russia is not invited.
No. We were not invited.
How can you make peace when one of the main? I mean, there has to be two parties on the table, Russia and Ukraine, right?
That's a good question. That's why we believe that this conference, I would apologize for this expression, is a monkey business. Right. Yeah. the plans of Mr. Zelensky and those who support him perhaps is to gather in Geneva to decide on something, and then to put it as an ultimatum before Russia. That will not work. That will not work. Yeah,
you would see this initiative as a PR stunt, a propaganda stunt?
Yeah, well, it's a kind of, I think, absolutely failed attempt to achieve something, something by a very, very bad means, I would say.
But I don't understand it as well, because Swiss has a kind of history to be neutral and to have peace conferences in Geneva, right?
Yes.
That's the history. How is it possible you can think that you can make peace when you don't even invite the other side?
Yes, that's the question that we were asking. We were not asking the Swiss side, because it's just there is no reason to ask. It's absolutely clear for us that it's kind of a political trick. But regrettably, Switzerland has lost, in our eyes, in our opinion, it's lost its credibility as a neutral state. It's now just absolutely on the side of
when there has to be real negotiations, peace negotiations, what do you think is the best place or the best surrounding to organize that?
It should be a country that at least has a rather sober approach to the situation. Well, perhaps China.
The West would consider China more on the side of Russia. Would Istanbul?
Well, maybe Istanbul, because they have already the practice of organizing Russian-Ukrainian contacts, yes, perhaps. But certainly it should, all peace process should be based not on Zelensky formula. The Zelensky formula, peace formula, so-called, he put it. It means that Russia should surrender, withdraw, pay contribution, and apologize, and that's rather, I would say, silly.
What would be your terms for a solution, for a peace settlement? Maybe you can say what are your tasks on
Well, certainly I can only express my personal view, because I'm not involved, but more or less
you are the official representative of the Russian government, right?
From what I know about our position, I believe certainly what we would demand, it's a neutral, non-aligned status of Ukraine.
Right.
Yeah, recognition of the Russian language as the official language for those who speak Russian. Complete ban on any Nazi ideology and practices. We know now that it's now flourishing, Nazi ideology is flourishing. In Ukraine, yeah. And
what do you consider Nazi? Is Nazi anti-Russian as well, or is Nazi really Nazi?
Nazi because their national hero is Mr. Bandera, who was one of the collaborators of Nazi Germany, and who exterminated Jews, just massively. And other figures that are war criminals and were considered war criminals by the Nuremberg Tribunal.
Right.
Yeah, and then certainly the existing territorial reality is also to be taken into consideration, to be recognized. That can be the basis for negotiations.
So that means neutral Ukraine, no Nazi ideology accepted in Ukraine, acceptance from Crimea as being Russian, and the four Russian areas, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson.
Yeah, certainly parts of Russia,
Parts of Russia, but on the moment, parts of that are still under control, especially Donetsk is still under control of
I think they are to be parts of Russia within their official borders.
Right.
But as time goes by, the situation, the conditions for Ukraine, for the peace talks are getting worse and worse because Russian army is advancing steadily, not maybe as quickly as we wish, but anyway. And sooner or later, and I believe rather sooner than later, the remaining parts of Donetsk region and Zaporozhye and Kherson region will be liberated. It's just.
You think when you would guess? I mean, there is said that maybe this summer. Or do we have to wait for the change of the government in the US? And do we have to wait for Mr. Trump? What do you think about that?
Frankly, I will not speculate. I don't think that this summer there will be ripe time for any peace talks. Maybe next year. I will not connect it with the results of the presidential elections in the United States because, first of all, I do not know what will be the result. But anyway.
Another question: How much backing has the Ukrainian president Zelensky with his own people? You think?
Well, first of all, we know that his term of office expired, I think, on the 21st of May.
Right.
So, and I don't know what the Ukrainian people think of his legitimacy. Because now there is the Ukrainian society is not now democratic. There is strict censorship. There are very, I would say, tense rules for behavior, and there is no freedom of expression.
Right.
But his popularity is on the decline, according to some independent polls. He used to have 90%. Now it's maybe 60%. And but that's also, it's these figures. I don't think they should be taken into consideration as a final figures.
Right.
No, but well, it's up to the Ukrainian society to decide whether they have legitimate president or not. For us, what is important for us, then when and if we have talks, we should talk with a person who legitimately represents Ukrainian people, Ukrainian state.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.